So most kids, they grew up hearing stories from their parents about things they did when they were younger. Well, my dad's stories, they were a little bit different. My dad told us he had helped write a song for the Steve Miller Band. He told us that he was connected to the Hells Angels. He always kind of had powerful people that he worked with and trusted him and really important things. And when you're a kid and you hear things like that from your own dad, you don't question it, you believe it. You know that he's telling you the truth because, he's your dad. And you know what? When he told stories, he made you feel like you were with him there, like you could see it, you could feel it. My dad was one of those people who could walk into a room and suddenly the room felt different. He wasn't really loud, but when he started talking to people, people listened. People loved visiting with him, and he loved visiting with people. He loved engaging with people and vice versa. He could start a conversation with anyone, and before long, they were deep into talking. He was definitely engaging. You could see what he was seeing. You were standing there beside him. And when that's your dad and your dad talks like that, it feels larger than life. One of the stories uh, he told me and me and Matt was about the Steve Miller Band. He said one winter night he was staying in a motel room, this little room. He was sitting there and it was really quiet. And there was all the other guys were in other rooms, like he was in a room by himself. And it was wintertime and there was snow on the ground and it was like beautiful and this moon was shining through the window and the light from the moon was actually falling across his paper as he was writing. And he told us in that moment, while the moonlight was shining across the page, the words of the song In the Wintertime came to him. And he wrote that song down. And it was just like a feeling and a moment in the motel room. And he was writing while the moon lit his paper. And it was just like you felt like you were there. You could see it, you could feel it, like everything slowed down. And you could just see the paper on the table. You could see him writing that song in the wintertime. And I believed every word. I remember imagining my dad sitting in that room. I can still imagine it. I can still see it that he sat there and he wrote that song. And I remember thinking, wow, my dad is so important. He is so amazing. Like I would tell kids at school that he wrote that song and they thought that was so cool. So the story went on, I'm sure. He also had another story. He said that he was connected to the Hells Angels and not just that he knew them, but like he was a part of them. And to me, it sounded like that was a big thing, but I was a little more scared about that. Like that made me really nervous. I didn't really know what the Hells Angels were, who they were, but it sounded dangerous to me, like you shouldn't be a part of that. But he was somehow a part of their world in his mind. And he never told the story like he was bragging about something. He just told it like he was remembering it, like it was in his memory and these things happened. And when someone tells a story like that, I mean, especially being your dad, you definitely believe it. So he could, I mean, my dad could sit down with anybody, and before long, they were pulled into his stories, pulled into conversation. And he had a way of telling in all his stories and making you feel like you were a part of it. You could see it, you could feel it. And as us kids, like those were the things that I loved. I loved engaging in my dad's stories and feeling what he felt and being a part of it. And he always was really personable with us and connected with us. And he would talk about how he connected with all these powerful people. And I mean, imagine that your dad was part of writing the songs to the Steve Miller Band, or your dad was part of the Hells Angels. And, being in Portland, we everybody knew who the Hells Angels were. Well, this other time, my dad, and this was right before the shelter, right before my dad flooded our house. Um, and that was the other stories that I talked about. So if you missed them, you can go back and listen to them. But this was kind of right before my mom brought us into the kitchen. My dad, and this is how my mom figured out that he was getting sick again, and she just didn't know if she could take it again. It had happened too many times, and it was just overwhelming to her. But so my dad, he was like, "Hey, I'm gonna make dinner." And he was really excited about it. He told my mom he would take care of everything that night. She could rest. She didn't need to make dinner. And so he was in the kitchen. I remember him being so excited and, you know, running in and out of the kitchen. He was making the salmon dinner. He was so proud of it. And it was like a special thing he was doing for the family. And I remember, like, being so excited for my dad. He was preparing the meal, and he was so excited, and I wasn't really thinking anything about it, and so my mom came to me quietly, and she kinda whispered in my ear, and she was like, "Hey, hey, whatever you do not eat that salmon tonight." And I'm like, "Why?" She was like, "Your dad's sick. He's sick right now." And I'm like, "He is? Like, he doesn't seem sick. He's helping." And she was like, "No, I was watching him. He went outside, he got some grass from the yard, and he's adding it to the salmon. So just pretend like you're eating it. I don't think he put it on the potatoes or anything else, but I watched him put it on the salmon before he baked it. So don't actually eat it. You can pretend, but just don't actually eat it." So it was really confusing. I was so disappointed that my dad actually was sick and he was adding grass to our dinner, and it was really confusing, and I was thankful my mom told me because obviously I didn't wanna be eating grass, but the world my dad was living in, I mean, he was so excited and he was so happy, and, you know, it it's kinda sad when you think about it because your mom is trying to protect you from not eating grass, and your dad is so exciting he excited he's making a meal for you. But, that was how life was a lot, and, he it wasn't long after that when my mom was like he had left the house, and she had pulled us into the kitchen, she was just like, "We've gotta get out of here. Dad is just bad," you know? And a lot of people in our family would notice when my dad was kinda going off the deep end, but as kids, you don't really notice that. You I don't know why, like, you just wanna pretend like things aren't bad, but one thing is I remember my dad was never like and my mom and my grandma and my uncles and my aunt, you didn't have to worry about actually talking about it. Unless my dad was in the middle of sickness, then he might get really mad, but otherwise, you could talk about it. He would say things like, "You know what? Yep. I'm crazy and I have the papers to prove it. And my mom and my grandma and everybody, we would all talk about it and it was open and we would laugh because I think that it was better than crying. And we would all just kind of make fun of it, including my dad. And I know that mental health issues aren't something to laugh about, but sometimes I think that it helps you if you can laugh about it and just be like, "Oh my goodness, here we go again," is so much better than being in like this dark depression and feeling so like upset that this is going on, that you just kind of run with it and you just kind of laugh about it. And later, when my dad would come back to being who he was, because he was a great man when he wasn't sick and it wasn't his fault, that he would laugh with you. Although he did make up stories like, well, you know, sissy, the only reason, well, he called me honey or babe. Usually it was babe. My brother called me sissy. And he would say, actually, the Hells Angels, they wanted me to flood the house so they could get the insurance money. And they own the house. And so you believe it. And you're just like, oh, okay. Like, that's how it was supposed to be because that way these people got some money for this house that they owned, even though later we found out that's not true. That's not, none of it's true. And we didn't actually go back and be like, Dad, how come you're lying? Because you know what? We just didn't. We were just like, he's sick. He believes it. And it's okay. He wasn't living inside whatever world he was living inside at the moment. And you just went with it. It was just easier that way. And you just moved on. And, but you know what? No matter what, I enjoyed the stories. I enjoyed listening to him, even if I knew the stories weren't true. He was my magical man. Like, I just loved everything about him, and I loved his stories. I loved even the fact that he was mental. No, no, I did not want him to be mental, but that part of him brought such imagination, and he was so intelligent, and, I mean, I guess it brought so many stories. He had so many stories. We did not live a boring life. Not one part of it ended up being boring, that's for sure, for sure. I have many more stories to tell you. And I really hope that these bring you to understand the inside of the mind of a mental issues and what it's like to be a child of someone who has mental health issues. And that it doesn't have to be horrible and scary and awful. That, it's just part of a world that I lived. And it was dangerous and mysterious and magical and wild and no boring part whatsoever. But you did have to try to keep your feet on the ground. And my mom always gave me that. She always gave me the aspect of, honey, that wasn't actually true, remember? Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. And I love that my mom for that, my grandma and all them that helped me to see what the true story was always. And not I didn't hate my dad for it. And I loved him. He was my dad.